request video series, a step-by-step guide to holistic health. Today's program will discuss meditation.
Well, my name is Shelley Lesson-Stockwell, and I'm a hypnotherapist, transpersonal hypnotherapist, which means that I'm very interested in all states of consciousness, the subconscious and the conscious and the superconscious, the part of us that knows expanded things like past lives and future lives and is very intuitive, highly creative. So I'm interested in that as a hypnotist, and I'm also a trance channel, which means that I put myself into an altered state and my guides speak through me.
In this program, we're going to explore how meditation allows us to make contact with our profound inner wisdom, to expand our consciousness. We'll talk about how meditation came from India, its histories, its origins, and how it's now used in Western civilization as a way of expanding awareness and even being used today to help people deal with debilitating illnesses like AIDS and cancer.
Well, my name's Petrea King, and I've been teaching meditation for the last 10 years to people with life-threatening illnesses, and this came about through my own experience of having leukemia in 1983. And since I found during my own experience that peace of mind really was my greatest ally, and that one of the most effective ways of finding that peace was through the techniques of meditation. And I'd already been quite familiar with the techniques of meditation, but really applied them with a new kind of diligence and energy at that time.
At times when problems must be solved, decisions must be made, and changes disrupt our lives, we sometimes feel unable to manage, lose confidence, and become consumed by tension and anxiety. As these problems continue, our energy is being depleted, which may set a pattern for insomnia, raise blood pressure, or cause other physical or physiological illnesses. With all these pressures of daily life, numerous people choose not to use drugs such as sleeping pills, antidepressants, or tranquilizers, and instead practice the ancient art of meditation. Meditation allows an individual to release stress and strains without drugs by reaching a tranquil state which refreshes the mind and relaxes the body. The practice of meditation is ultimately aimed at restoring both the will and the ability to manage one's life.
I guess when I was first diagnosed with cancer, I panicked like most people. And initially I felt that this couldn't possibly be me because for myself it came at a time of great stress in our family where my brother had just died and my children were 4 and 7. The idea of my dying at that time just seemed too much for our family to cope with. And I guess I went through a real turmoil in my mind of looking at taking responsibility for my own life, realizing that it's not so much what happens to us, but how we respond to what happens to us, and that can be a real point of power, that we can't always control what happens to us in our life, but we can control how we're going to respond to what happens to us. And so for me, one of the most important things to look at was meditation, because I found that it was a wonderful way of regaining a sense of control over my mind. I couldn't control what was happening in my body or in my life, but I could control what was happening in my mind.
A number of individuals who practice meditation on a regular basis have reported the following: the construction of mental bridges and communication lines between various thoughts, enable universal or cosmic ideas to be formulated within the mind, bringing an expansion of consciousness, allow the contact with the inner self, self-actualization and self-determination, the generation of internal energy, the opening of the gates of wisdom, the development of the eye of reason and opposing viewpoints, allow the intellect to be clear and sound, awaken the sense of responsibility, and the opening up of the permanent fountain of joy. In India, and in many parts of Asia, meditation has been practiced for thousands of years as a method of achieving spiritual enlightenment. In the West, however, meditation did not become popular until the 1960s, when Eastern music and culture attracted pop musicians, such as the Beatles, and masses of young people began looking for new approaches to life's problems. The most famous teacher of meditation in the West was Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, who used transcendental meditation in his mantras or chants. Yogi's teachings attracted many devoted followers. However, numerous Westerners were put off by his method of linking meditation with Oriental or eccentric religions. Other forms of meditation, however, continued to flourish in the West as many Christian religious orders, retreats of Jesuits, and spiritual leaders incorporated numerous meditation techniques. Today, many people in the West teach and practice many forms of meditation without religious contentions. Meditation is regarded by its practitioners as a supreme self-help method using no more than the powers of concentration.
Meditation for a lot of people is a new experience, and oftentimes they've read that it's a good idea to meditate when you have a life-threatening or a chronic illness, and they wonder why. You know, what are the benefits going to be for me to do this? And I think almost immediately they experience a sense of profound peace, and it's like a holiday from the whole chaotic diagnosis, treatment regimes, how do I live with pain, how do I live with uncertainty. All of those questions are all put on hold, and it's like you have this wonderful holiday in which you find replenishment and an inner sense of nourishment. Then when you come back to deal with those questions or issues in your life, you're in a far better place to make decisions and to feel right about the therapies that you're embarking upon. Usually we don't find that people have difficulty with emotions coming forth during meditation. It's quite common that people will find they've got tears down their cheeks, or that they feel a sense of a very powerful, perhaps, feeling coming up. But that if you stay with the practice of meditation, then you stay with the technique and you allow those feelings or those thoughts to pass without actively engaging in thinking about them. And so it's not really necessary to understand where the feeling came from or why I'm having it or what I should do about it, but simply just to let yourself have the feeling. So much of our life is spent in trying not to have so-called negative feelings or feelings that we're afraid of. And to me, being positive is being real with what's going on. And if there is grief there or sadness there or fear there, then by all means, let's talk about it and express it and feel it, because that's the quickest way through any of those feelings, is actually to experience them. And when we're under a lot of stress, we're actually producing chemicals into our bloodstream that are detrimental for our immune system and detrimental for many of the other functions within our bodies. When we can allow those stress chemicals to subside, then we create a healthy environment in which whatever healing can take place will do so. So that's why it becomes very important that we allow those stress chemicals and hormones to subside. There's also research coming out now that shows that it's only in a state of deep relaxation and meditation that we begin to secrete some chemicals deep within the brain, in the limbic system, which actually speed up the healing process within our bodies. This is very exciting because it means that by putting ourselves into a state of deep relaxation and meditation, we are actively cooperating with the healing mechanisms within our own bodies. There are many different ways in which people practice meditation. There's active forms of meditation, which are like Tai Chi or yoga, and that's where we're involved in some physical, or Qigong, that's where we're involved in some physical activity and we're bringing our awareness to the fact of the movement of our body. In a way, things like windsurfing are also like an active meditation. Meditation is any activity that will bring you into the present moment. rather than the mind always projecting into the future or chewing over the past. Now, for instance, the windsurfer who's out there maximising his speed or her speed with the water, the craft, the wind, that person isn't thinking about what they're going to have for dinner or the conversation they had with Auntie Flo last week. So in a way, that's why we enjoy doing things like that, because they bring us into the present. So the techniques of meditation are techniques which will help you to bring your mind into the present. So mostly they relate to one of two, and that is either focusing on the breath or on the repetition of a word or a phrase silently in the mind. There are many other techniques of meditation, but these are the two most common forms. And when we're really focusing on the breath, it's important to remember your body is always in the present. Our body is never in the future, never in the past. And so one of the best ways of bringing us back to the present is to connect with the senses of the body. And by connecting with our breath and being aware of the rising and falling of the abdomen, or the expansion of your chest and contraction, or at the point where the air enters and leaves your body right at the tip of the nostrils, is a good way for bringing the mind into the present, because you can't be thinking about what's for dinner or the blood test or the CAT scan or the T-cell result next week if you're absolutely focused on being in the present. So it's a technique that brings you back into what's happening right now. See, a lot of us spend a lot of time worrying about the future or chewing over the past, and then we mess up the present. And if people have got a blood test due next week or a CAT scan or whatever it might be, a lot of people spend a whole week worrying in anticipation. Techniques of relaxation and meditation help us to live more acutely in the present, so that we're not forever projecting into the future or chewing over the past, that we know that the CAT scan is next week and it will take care of itself, and it doesn't need to alter my quality of life in living today well. The particular way that I teach meditation has three separate components to it. One is relaxation, where we're talking about the physical body and keeping it in a relaxed state. The second is using techniques of visualization, which is harnessing the mind to create a series of images that help your body to relax more deeply, and which in this context has a healing component to it. The third aspect is meditation, in which we're observing the activity that goes on. So that the difference is, normally when we have a thought that comes into our mind, the mind starts to get busy and active with it. With meditation, we observe the thought and let it go. Observe the thought and let it go. And so a lot of people expect meditation to be a really blissful experience with the Hallelujah chorus in the background, and it's usually not like that at all. It's usually the discipline of constantly letting go the mind when it's got caught up with thoughts. I think when you have any serious illness, we're inundated with issues and questions and concerns and worries about our family, about at what point do I give up my work, what therapies am I going to adopt, am I going to go through with all the medical treatment that's suggested, are there other things that I can incorporate in addition to the medical treatment that I'm embarking upon. And I think all of those questions can just seem insurmountable, especially when you're first diagnosed. And that if you have a place of peace within yourself where you can really make clear decisions about what's right for you, then you're going to be in a much better state than if you're making decisions out of fear. And a lot of people spend a lot of energy rushing around looking for therapies, when if they had access to a place of calmness within themselves, they'd be able to choose the right therapies for them. I guess a lot of people, when they're originally in the turmoil of facing their mortality at a time when they didn't expect to, or in fact the debility of living with a chronic illness is also very, very demanding, that if you can control the thoughts that are happening in your mind, it gives you a sense of peace and a sense of, I can manage this situation, rather than this situation is overwhelming and I feel out of control. And I think as soon as we regain that sense of control, then we also create a better environment for healing within our bodies. And in fact, now science is bearing this out, that certainly people who express their emotions and who practice techniques of relaxation and meditation, if they have a life-threatening illness, certainly far outlive their prognosis or far outlive the statistics for their illness. And in fact, now in most cancers, for instance, people live twice as long if they're involved in those things than if they're not. So there are some very good scientific reasons as far as improving quality and quantity of life, as well as improving how we feel about ourselves and each day that we do live. I mean, very often when people have an illness and they don't experience any symptoms of it, they think that they've dealt with having the illness. HIV is a particularly good example of that, that people feel like, yes, I've come to terms with the fact that I'm HIV positive. Along comes a flu even. It doesn't even have to be an HIV-related illness. And immediately up comes a whole lot of fear, and people think, gosh, I haven't dealt with this at all. And then they start that whole process of beginning to accept the fact that this is a problem in their life and how are they going to deal with it. Meditation throughout all of that will be really beneficial in helping people to accept the situation that they're in and to feel clear about what are they going to do now that they are in that situation. And you can begin to, once you accept that, yes, I am HIV positive, then you can begin to look at, well, what are the things that make sense to me to incorporate into my lifestyle that are going to be beneficial in addition to whatever my doctor might suggest. When meditation becomes second nature to you, you begin to see that the benefits of it spill over to every part of your life, and that meditation is something that's not a separate component in your life, but something that just becomes part of your everyday experience, so that you have a much greater ability to deal with thought by thought, what's happening for you, rather than having them all come crowding in on top of your mind. This can be very helpful when you're under stress and when you've got decisions to make, because you have a much greater clarity in which you can think through the treatments or the options of various therapies that you might be contemplating, and that you can think through the consequences of those and make right decisions for yourself, rather than making them feeling all panicky. Panic is no help to you at all when you're in a crisis and you're trying to find your way through it. Meditation can give you the clarity that you need in order to make the right decisions. Most people who have physical pain find that the techniques of relaxation and meditation greatly enhance their ability to deal effectively with pain. And in fact, most people find they only need about half the pain medication that others need who don't have those techniques as their backup. Also, you can begin to experience pain as a sensation that's happening in your body that doesn't have an ouch attached to it. So that rather than being angry with the part of your body or feeling that you're out of control with the pain, that you begin to observe the pain in your body rather than be subject to it. Very often, if we're in pain, we begin to hold our bodies in ways that are actually very uncomfortable to protect that part of our body. So that, say I've got a pain in my liver, I may very well find that I have to sit in another position that's not very comfortable in order to take the pressure off my liver. But that can lead to a whole lot of tension and discomfort in other parts of my body, and it increases my overall experience of pain. The more relaxed I am, and perhaps also incorporating techniques like massage or heat or some other technique that's very gentle to deal with this stress and tension in the other parts of my body, then it leaves me just to deal with the pain that I have in my liver. And then I might want to look at, well, what can I do to be as friendly as possible to my liver? What foods could I leave out that are hard work for my liver? What are the things that I can do to minimize the pain that I experience there? And with the pain that I have still, what techniques can I use that will help me to manage it better so that I feel I'm in control of it rather than the other way around? Most of the people who love someone who has a life-threatening illness are under enormous stress and strain as well. The issues that you might be facing are quite different from your loved one who has a life-threatening illness. Oftentimes we feel guilty about our good health, or feel guilty that we can still go for the evening walk when our partner can't. Or in some cases, if it's a child who's sick, parents very often go through a lot of guilt about what might I have been able to do to avoid this happening. And even though in our rational mind we know that a lot of those thoughts really don't have any place, nonetheless we're mostly prone to having them. So techniques of relaxation for those people can be enormously beneficial as well. It helps to replenish themselves so that they're in a much better state to take care of someone else. It's very hard to constantly be caring for someone else unless you're also making sure that your own needs are being met. And it's very important that you go out for walks or do some activity that really nurtures you, that gives you back a sense of yourself, in order for you to be able to continue providing good support and loving care for someone that is ill. Most people with cancer find that the techniques of meditation are enormously helpful in creating that sense of calmness within their body, and also that sense of calmness within their mind, so that they have the clarity when they're making choices and decisions. It also, of course, affects the chemical environment within our body, which will help support your immune system to function as well as possible. It also helps in dealing with the various treatments that we might be having and in minimizing the side effects of those. It also helps, of course, with pain and our ability to cope with the discomforts or the upsets that we experience physically when we have a life-threatening illness. So there are many reasons why, for people with cancer in particular, these techniques are enormously valuable. When we're teaching people with cancer how to meditate, I don't personally focus on the fact that they have a disease within their bodies. The important thing to me is to focus on empowering the whole of the person so that they feel so well and so intact with their self-esteem that that healing happens from within out, rather than seeing ourselves attacking the cancer in some way. Most people with cancer will say that it hasn't been an entirely negative experience. In fact, most people would say, I wouldn't want to lose what I've learned through having cancer. I'd like it to go away now, but I wouldn't want to lose what I've learned by having it. And I think that's a very important thing, that cancer is not necessarily the enemy, and that by creating an environment through our attitude, our diet, the physical environment we put ourselves in, the meditation techniques, all of these things can help support us in regaining our health. Your body knows how to heal itself. It has many situations in the past where it's dealt with healing, and that we now need to provide an environment in which we can create a place where that healing can take place. People with HIV have an enormous amount of stress in their lives because they're not quite sure when they're first diagnosed about who are the people who are going to be there to support me, how am I going to cope with this, who do I tell, is this the end of my sex life, when will I get ill, how long will I live? There are all kinds of questions that come flooding in, and really no one can give accurate answers to all of those questions. So again, if we're living with the stress of those real identity issues, then it's very important that we have recourse to a sense of peace and calmness within ourselves. Again, from that place we know how to make decisions, how to choose the therapies that are going to help support us in our health. One of the most important things when you have a life-threatening illness is the amount of love in your life, the amount of support, the amount of care and concern that people show to you. And very often, if we have an illness which we're not very public about, we can end up feeling very isolated. So it's important that for people with HIV, that they set aside some time where they really create an environment for nurturing within themselves. I recommend for everyone that we have a look at what are the things that nurture me? What are the things that help really connect me with myself? For some people that's music or being in nature. For others it's solitude or laughter and being amongst their friends. Whatever it is that gives you back a sense of yourself, then by all means incorporate that into your healing plan. For a lot of people, that very best nurturing comes from the techniques of meditation, so that every day I find time where I can really deeply be at peace with myself and allow my body to do whatever healing is necessary. I believe in the future that it will become illegal for a doctor to tell a patient how long they think that they have to live, because it will be shown that we begin to put in practice the physiology that will bring about that prognosis. I believe that we can say to any patient, if it's the case, you have a very serious illness, and many people die quite quickly of this illness. However, some people don't, and we want to give you all of the support, skills and education so that you're one of those people. Then that person feels like they're on our healing team rather than someone who's telling us that they know more about us than we do ourselves. For a lot of people, they believe that whether they get well or not is a matter strictly between themselves and God or some higher power. For other people, they feel, I want to have some impact on what happens to me, and I believe that I can regain a sense of control over what's happening to me and that I can make a difference by the choices that I make. In a recent study of 3,500 people who had spontaneous remissions, where they were all beyond any further medical help, there were 4 particular qualities that were evident in these people. They all had a sense of control over their life. So everyone feels out of control when we're first diagnosed, but they were people who regained a sense of control by looking at what they could do to help themselves in addition to their medical treatment. They were people who had a commitment to living. Now that might sound simple, surely everyone wants to live. But when you really talk to people, oftentimes people are very worn down and weary or have felt trapped for a long period of time, and that really they're a bit tired of living. So to have a deep commitment and passion and enthusiasm for living. They were all people who had a sense of challenge, something that they could get their teeth into, but that wasn't overwhelming. One was a bank manager who hated being a bank manager and always wanted to play the piano, and he gave up being a bank manager and learned the piano and went into remission. For some people, when they got out of an extremely unhealthy relationship, that was a turning point for their immune system. So it's different for different people. For some people it was they'd always wanted to live in the country, and that they now saw that because they had an illness, that this was a good reason to sell up and move to the country. So a sense of control, a sense of commitment to living, a challenge, and the last one was very interesting. It was a sense of connectedness. And whether that was a connectedness in a sense of belonging to a family or belonging to a group of people, or feeling valued, loved and supported by others, or feeling at one with life, whatever it was for the individual, but there was that deep sense of connection. So those 4 qualities were the qualities that helped people to create an environment in which they had a so-called spontaneous remission. These things we can all work on. Meditation is one of the best bases in order to regain that sense of control over our life, to really sharpen up our commitment to living by dealing with the unresolved issues of the past and by seeing the future as something that's full of possibilities and something I can feel positive about. We can all create challenges in our life that are enjoyable, surmountable, and that we're going to get a sense of satisfaction from. And we can all improve our sense of connectedness by looking at where do I feel deeply loved and supported in my life, and how can I improve that? With these ingredients as our basis, then we can begin to choose which diets are appropriate for us or which therapies might be appropriate for us. Rather than running around looking for all those therapies, we've got a better basis from which to choose, rather than feeling that we don't have a choice and that we have to incorporate everything and getting panicky about it. Many of the people that we work with have had HIV for many, many years now. In fact, some of them have had it for 12 and more years, and they haven't had any illnesses so far. Some people have found that their T4 cell count has dropped dramatically, and yet we still have many of those people with no T4 cells or very few T4 cells who are maintaining their health and keeping themselves in good shape. Obviously, if you're going to be panicky all the time, that's not going to happen. One such person, Stephen, had a dream of something that he really wanted to do for other people, and that was a major focus for him in his life. And even though he's had the virus for many years now, he's never had any difficulty with his health because he has focused on all of the things that will help support him in being well, which enables him to fulfill his dream. A dream can be very important. The belief that we can fulfill that dream is equally important. And we all need to dream courageously and dream with inspiration so that we can set in motion the motivation that we need in order to make the changes in our life that will lead to increasing our health. Colin was one such client. When Colin was first diagnosed with bowel cancer, which had spread into his liver, he was told that he had 3 to 6 months to live. And this was Christmas Eve. And it's most unfortunate to get news like that when there are very few services around that really give you good support. And what he decided to do was to look at what can I do to improve my own quality of life, and what might I be able to do that's going to make a difference. He decided he wanted to be at his granddaughter's 21st birthday, and she was 2 at the time. And so that gave him a goal to work towards. In addition to that, Colin began to look at dietary considerations. He certainly learnt techniques of relaxation, meditation, looked at the stresses in his life and talked about the things that mattered to him. He had a great deal of love and support from his family, and gradually he embarked upon a journey that really gave him a great sense of being alive. And in fact now, which I think is 6 years down the track, now feels more alive than he ever did. And I think, again, if Colin had believed at that point that the doctor was right and that he did have 3 to 6 months to live, I'm not saying that his positive attitude healed him, because he still has problems, but if he'd believed that he was going to die within 3 to 6 months, I think he would have thrown in the towel and not put into practice all of those positive things. As it is, he's had 6 years so far of extremely good quality living, and as I say, feels more alive now than at any other time. The way we teach relaxation and meditation techniques here at our centre comprises 3 really separate components, although they blend into each other very easily. We start off with a physical relaxation, a progressive relaxation, in which we go through the various parts of the body and allow those areas to relax. A lot of people say, well, I'm a very relaxed person, and they're unaware of how much tension they always hold in their shoulders. Most of us have a favourite tension place in our bodies, and for some of us that's in our jaw or in our neck or shoulders. For some people it's in the tummy, other muscle groups of the body. If you can become aware of where your favourite tension place is, and then bring your awareness back to that area from time to time and let it soften again if you've tensed it up. When your tissues are in a tense state, it means that the blood circulation can't flow freely through that area. Oftentimes the tension that we're under when we're living with a life-threatening illness, or the drugs that we're on, can create chemicals in our bloodstream which get lodged in the muscles, and that they can actually make the muscles feel quite sore. The more we can relax our bodies, the more we cooperate with our blood circulation so that it can wash away those toxins and stress chemicals in our bloodstream, can wash them away out of the muscles so that they can be eliminated from our bodies. When we're talking about techniques of visualization, we're talking about using your imagination to create a series of images which help your body to relax more deeply, and which in this context has a healing component to it. Now, in order to create images that are in your mind, you need to use the right side of your brain, so that even though you might be sitting there with your eyes open, if you imagine one of those beautiful tropical islands with golden sandy beaches and those palm trees that grow out at funny angles and that lovely aqua green coloured water, that even though you're sitting there with your eyes open, you have to see flashes of colours or flashes of images even whilst I'm talking about it. In order to do that, you have to access the right side of your brain. And the right side of the brain is very much concerned with your intuition, your creativity, your imagination, and your inspiration. So that's for a lot of us, we don't actually use those qualities nearly as much as we could do. Some people are particularly visual and they'll see all the images that I might talk about in a practice, and other people are not particularly visual. If they're not particularly visual, we encourage them to go more with the sound of the music, the sound of the voice, rather than the content. But by visualizing, we can help to create an environment of peace within our bodies. They've found that people who have a view out their window when they're in hospital are in hospital on average a day less and have fewer post-operative complications than people who look out onto a brick wall or who have no outlook. And that people who imagine that they're looking out onto a scene of nature are in the same group as the original ones. So we can trick our mind by imagining that we're on a beautiful tropical island and that we've got golden sand beneath our feet. We can certainly create the physiology as if we were on that island. With meditation, we're talking about being consciously aware of what's going on in our mind, what's going on in our awareness. So into your mind comes a thought, and instead of engaging in it, instead of thinking about it, you allow that thought to go. So when into your mind comes, I've got to go shopping, before your mind starts going through all the cupboards and deciding what needs to be added to the shopping list, that you recognize that it's become active and you let it go. Now, a lot of people say, oh, I didn't have a good meditation practice because my mind was full of thoughts. If that's the case, that just means that you were really aware of the amount of activity that was going on in your mind. So it doesn't mean it was a bad meditation practice. If you observe the fact that your mind got caught up 50 times during a practice and that you had to let it go 50 times, that's the whole practice of meditation. The hallmarks of meditation are that the mind becomes more quiet than usual and your breathing becomes more quiet than usual. And it's usually much more shallow than usual. So usually when you're in deep sleep, you actually take in a lot of oxygen. In meditation, you actually have a deeper physiological rest because the breathing is very, very light. So those are the hallmarks of meditation, that your breathing is quieter than usual and that your mind is quieter than usual. Once you begin to observe the thoughts in your mind, you'll begin to see that they slow down and that there's actually some space between the thoughts. And in that space, there's a great deal of peace and joy and tranquility. There are lots of things that we can do to make sure that our meditation practice is as beneficial for us as possible. I don't say that there are any better techniques than another. The best technique is the one that works for you. And to shop around and do whatever you need to do to find a technique that really feels right for you. For instance, some people are not particularly visual in their imagination, and they may find techniques of visualization need to be worked with in a way that really makes sense for them. We often encourage those people to go more with the sound of the music or the sound of the voice rather than the content. But no, I don't think there's any negative aspects to meditation. I think, as I said, it's one of the best ways of regaining a sense of control over your life. The important things with meditation are not so much the length of practice, but the regularity of practice. And it's far better to do 15 minutes twice a day than an hour and a half once a week. And that even 15 minutes twice a day will make a profound difference within a month. People find that their lives seem to flow along much more easily, they sleep better, their memory's improved, their concentration's improved. All of those things are really valuable, especially if you're under a lot of stress because you have an illness. Some people, when they're learning techniques of meditation, have concerns about, is there a guru? Am I going to suddenly be part of a religious group or a cult of some sort? Or is someone going to manipulate my thinking in a way that I won't have control over? No one can manipulate your thinking unless you give them control to do so. And certainly the way we teach relaxation and meditation techniques at our centre, there's no manipulation. And people are left very much in charge of their own experience. In fact, a lot of people find that the techniques of meditation give them a profoundly spiritual experience, and yet we don't really use a spiritual language to describe them, because we find that people have a mixture of histories of religious experience, and they're not all positive. And so we don't put it into a spiritual context at all. However, what people actually describe as their experience is usually profoundly spiritual. They talk about a sense of oneness with all life, or they talk about a sense of deep and profound peace, even though they may be living with a life-threatening illness. They talk about profound joy and a sense that all is well, even though they may have a problem in their body that's markedly affecting their quality of life. So people find that they can access a place of deep peace within themselves, regardless of what's happening in their body or regardless of what's happening in their psychological world. I think these days there's more and more interest being shown by the medical profession in techniques of relaxation and meditation. Some of them will sort of pat you on the head and say, that's nice, dear, if it makes you feel better, then do it. But I think more and more doctors are realizing that their patients who do practice relaxation and meditation on a regular basis seem to fare far better with the traumas of living with a life-threatening illness, and in fact now we're seeing more and more they far outlive the average as well when they're practicing these techniques. What's being shown now in our medical research is that your thoughts and feelings are not just things that we experience in our mind. They create a physiological state, that every thought, every feeling produces the release of chemicals into our bloodstream, and that these chemicals will very much affect the functioning of all aspects of our body, and particularly our immune system. So it makes a difference the kind of thoughts and feelings you hold in your mind. If you have chronic fear and you never deal with your fear and you stay trapped with fear, fear is fertilizer for cancer. Fear is fertilizer. You know, it creates an environment, a physical, chemical environment in your bloodstream in which your immune system cannot function properly. So techniques, yes. Well, it actually creates chemicals that slow down the effectiveness of your T lymphocytes. So that's why it's so important for us to deal with the feelings that we have, the attitudes, the beliefs, the habits that we have, because not only are these things that we like or dislike, but they actually dictate our chemical environment within our body and will directly affect our physiology. So that's why patients who are actively involved in practicing these techniques, who are dealing with their feelings, dealing with the issues that come up in their life, are creating a better physical environment within their bodies in which healing can take place. I think the future means that we will really study what are the things that people can do to help themselves in addition to the medical treatment, and that from when you're diagnosed right the way through, those two things work hand in hand, so that your doctor would say, you have a very serious illness and many people die of this illness. However, some people don't. And we want to give you all of the support and skills and encouragement in order for you to be one of those. We want you to look at the stresses in your life and look at how you might minimize them or let go of them altogether. And we'd like you to learn some techniques that will help you deal more effectively with the stresses that have to remain in your life as you go through with this illness. We want you to look at your nutrition. What are the things that you could eat over this next period of time when you're on fairly demanding treatments that will keep your body in as healthy a shape as possible? We'd really like you to meet some other people who've been through the treatments that you're going through so that you can ask them questions and feel really confident about what you're embarking upon. So that by the time you leave that appointment, you feel like, gosh, I've got a part to play in this. There are a whole lot of things that I can do in addition to just the medical treatment that will really give me back a sense of control, and that my doctor is part of my healing team rather than I'm on his or her conveyor belt. You see, very often when a doctor is focusing on your illness, he might be leaving out the fact that you're recently separated, that one of your kids is in trouble with the police, that your husband's overseas on business at present, or whatever it might be, that there are a whole range of other aspects to this person other than just their illness. And if we're not addressing those, then we're only doing half the job. Meditation is simple to learn, it's fun, and can be approached as an adventure rather than something that I have to do now that I have a life-threatening or life-inhibiting illness. It's something that can help us to live better and help us to live longer and with greater peace of mind. All of the people that come to our centre are people who are busy about their own healing. They believe that not only does healing come from within ourselves, but that we can also actively cooperate with our bodies in creating that ideal environment in which healing can take place.
The key to meditation lies in the management of concentration on one idea or object instead of the hundreds of things which usually clutter our minds. Reducing the flow of information and sensations allows the body, mind and spirit to cope physically, emotionally and mentally with daily and future problems, enabling tension to be released and thus healing to occur.